Hi, welcome to our observability predictions for 2022. Thank you for stopping by, spending some time with us at this conference. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'm principal with Techstrong Research. And I am joined by some fantastic experts in observability. And we're going to be talking about several topics, thinking about 2022 and beyond. So let's get right to our topic. I'd like to introduce our panelists from three distinguished companies as well. First, let's start out with Lodewijk, who is with StackState, CTO and co-founder. Lodewijk, introduce yourself, please.
Hi there. Thanks for the invitation. So, I'm Lodewijk. I'm one of the co-founders of StackState and also the CTO. I was a software engineer before pretty much my whole life. Grew up developing software, Commodore 64 and so forth. But I also was a DevOps architect once I realized that you can ship good software to production and then still have it fail because of the infrastructure underneath. And really when that movement went into infrastructure as code, that's when I started to get interested in observability as well, or what does that time still monitoring. And we founded StackState with many of the ideas of observability, actually a little bit more comprehensive than what observability is today. And so StackState is an observability company. We're really good at root cause analysis. We track changes across time, so we can easily tell you if a problem occurs, where did that, what was the underlying change that actually caused that problem. We do that with automatic root cause analysis. We have a bunch more other stuff like autonomous anomaly detection and so forth. That's the short introduction.
Very good. Thank you so much, Lodewijk. Next, Brian Dawson. Brian Dawson is a DevOps evangelist, very well known in the space. Brian, good to be having you with us today. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. I'm glad to be with this group. And I guess to first sort of introduce myself a bit, I've been a software professional, starting as a developer for, I think, as hard as it's sort of to get out, about 30 years now. I like to say I've had a career primarily just focused on optimizing and improving software development and delivery all the way from concept to customer. While I've spent most of my time developing and delivering product, I've worked in a range of roles at a range of companies, from Sony Computer Entertainment or PlayStation as we know it, to CloudBees, to the Linux Foundation. And I'm proud of how my experience has sort of given me a panoramic perspective on what it takes to successfully deliver software, which is particularly relevant to this discussion of observability we're having today. These days, I'm focused on consulting to help people bring software development and delivery best practices to their organization.
Excellent. Couldn't think of anybody better to be doing that. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Cyrille, the Clerc. Cyrille, if you tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, Elastic.
Thank you very much, Mitch. So my name is Cyrille Clerc, and I am a product management lead at Elastic. I am in charge of AI Ops, alerting, and I also cover open telemetry on CI/CD observability. Before joining Elastic, I worked on CI/CD on software delivery lifecycle with Brian at CloudBees, and I was a product lead for the Jenkins offering at CloudBees. And before this, I was doing consulting. I was a developer, and I am still a developer because when my day job is finished, I love to do open source contributions, open telemetry on Jenkins at the moment. And so Elastic as a company is pretty well known for Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. We have three different solutions. We have our observability solution, and I work for this group, where we do infrastructure monitoring, application monitoring, digital experience monitoring, unifying logs, metrics, traces, and now profiling as well. In addition to observability, we have a security offering. On a third, but not the least, we also have search, enterprise search capabilities. And search is connecting the dots between all our products. So that's it.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you all three for being here today and being with our audience. Well, let's jump into it. I don't know if there's been a hotter topic, a lot of hot topics in the last year or two, but certainly observability has been near at the top. Observability tracing, SRE, all kinds of dimensions of observability, of course. I'm curious as to what are some of the drivers? Is it just, I think we're past the step of it's more than just a marketing ploy to rename our product something else and put a bunch of money behind it and convince people to buy it again. I think we're past that stage. But why has observability risen to the top as such an important issue? What are some of those drivers? Maybe Brian, if you can start us out, because I know you have a very broad and deep perspective on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I kind of have in my mind a list. I'm sure others will cover, but I think there's just a lot of things that have kind of converged, right, to bring us to this term and practice of observability as something more, as a shift from this concept of simply logging and monitoring. But I'd say a couple of the key ones are going to be the move to the cloud. Which has, brought about a move to microservices, to pizza teams. So you have a given application or system being built from multiple services that the team that owns the application doesn't necessarily own. That's resulted in increased complexity. And then at the same time, we've moved both into kind of this iterative delivery movement and into taking on a DevOps perspective where we need to move faster, and we need to move faster while considering the entire system and supporting shared insights and collaborations between the development side and the operations side. So again, to summarize, cloud, microservices, complexity, and new modern delivery models.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, one other way of looking at that is also how dynamic environments are, and that's something that you see with cloud, but you see that also with Kubernetes. That these super dynamic environments, they need a different type of monitoring strategy, because if everything is just static, you basically plug in your instrumentation. And then, you go and you have a dashboard, and then the moment that something goes wrong, you look at your dashboard. But now that everything is constantly changing, you also have to change those plugs, and that instrumentation also needs to change. And that's what you can see indeed, like the cloud is an important driver in that, but also microservices and stuff becoming just way more dynamic is a big driver in what we see that with the observability.
I would second this on group cloud Kubernetes into the cloud native architecture, which are also microservices. These are very promising architectures. We get a lot of hope with this. However, we see that we have a challenge when we go in production, a challenge of availability. And here what we discovered is that the established best practices to operate system are outdated and no longer work. Because, as Lodewijk said, things are ephemeral, they are designed for failures, you have chaos all the time. And so what we realize on Elastic, we are simultaneously an established company in the logs domain on a new company because we have now an integrated observability solution. We see that what used to work in the past with your logs that you were screening with your eyes, with your static dashboard, this no longer works well to operate modern platform. And we have entered a world where we talk about unknown unknowns because outages are the combinations of multiple problems rather than in the past with a monolith just being, if I simplify, the database going down. We talk about contributing factors for root cause. And so here we need to completely reinvent the best practices on the techniques to operate the platform on the applications. And this is why we also see new tools, new companies being created. StackState, I guess it's also the reason why you decided to enter the business, us, Elastic, it's why we decided to launch our observability solution, to join forces with an APM company and so on. This is what these are the key drivers. And if we don't succeed in achieving observability to help improve the reliability of these very exciting new technologies, cloud-native technologies, then maybe the whole cloud journey, cloud-native transformation that will not succeed. And here, maybe Brian has some insights on how companies face the challenges of going in production with exciting technologies, but in fact, having outages and being disappointed.
Yeah, well, and I think I'll shift on where you sort of tagged me to Cyrille to maybe present something back to the team, and that's it's my feeling that another change that has kind of focused attention on observability and, as you said, availability is our consumer expectations of the systems we deliver today, right? So more and more through mobile and sort of wider technology adoption, we're delivering systems to people that they expect to always be on. Right. If I need to send a bank transfer to my son at college so he could get his book on the last day of registration of class, right, I need to have a level of confidence that service is going to be up and available. So again, in my experience, I'm kind of seeing the difference between sort of monitoring of static systems with reactive response and maintaining a continual understanding of the changes of state in your system, with the goal of keeping them running and performant, is somewhat driven by consumer expectations. And Lodewijk, I'm curious, is across the journey of StackState, have you seen that? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it from multiple angles, but it's actually kind of interesting where observability is really about it really works well on these dynamic decentralized applications, which are, of course, created because of the rising high demand requirements of consumers and so forth. Right. But then on the other hand, in order to tackle the problems that those dynamic environments then have, you need the opposite of decentralization. You need to actually centralize the data. And so when you're talking about observability, we talk about logs and metrics and traces, but really the key is in bringing those together, because before observability, we had log solutions, we had metric solution with trace solutions, and we still have all those, but the pressure is on to bring all of that together to solve some of the problems that we have in keeping those high service level objectives. To bring those to actually tackle those problems in one place instead of in three places or in n places.
I think that's spot on, Lodewijk, with kind of bringing that back together, right? So that you can really see across the whole system, but from one place in a very dynamic environment. Well, and that kind of fits on the topic of challenges, some of the challenges that we've had around implementing observability. Let's touch on what are some of the elements necessary for an effective observability strategy, and we can touch on some of the challenges as well. People may be coming at from a greenfield cloud native. Okay, I can kind of build this in from the beginning. Other folks may be coming from a more of a logs and metrics and tracing world, and now how do I kind of take that next step? Who wants to take a crack at defining at least a first step in what might be an element of observability strategy?
I have an interesting anecdote on this. I think some of the challenges we have in observability strategies are pretty similar to the challenges that people faced when going in a DevOps transformation or even going in an agile transformation. And there are questions of culture, of people, of process. And when we see today the thought leader in some ways of observability is the CNCF, where they have open telemetry, they have Prometheus, they have Kubernetes. A key strength of CNCF is that they have learned from the past challenges, like they have learned from OpenStack challenges and failures. And they say, thanks to what we have learned, we don't reproduce the same mistakes with Prometheus, with Kubernetes, and so on. And I think here we will see some Similar question, as I said, DevOps journey or Agile, like how to measure success. And I guess it's also a question with StackState. How do I realize the value of this tool, which in fact implies the value of this change in my process, on which we see also at Elastic, like how usually a criteria is mean time to resolution of incidents. How do I reduce this so I achieve the benefit of observability? And here, with my culture of CI/CD, it relates to something that Brian is very familiar with, is how do I deploy changes with confidence? Because most of the things we see on, this is probably the DNA of StackState, is usually outages are caused by changes in the system. And so how do I measure success? Is it qualitative culture in my company? Is it quantitative culture? And this, I think, is an interesting element to have in mind, how to measure.
Yeah, I think
Lodewijk, would you have other points?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. That's a really good point. I think, actually capturing those measurements in some type of shared document, or just actually thinking about observability and actually creating a strategy is even the first thing. We talk about observability strategies a lot, but from my own anecdotal experience, I've seen very few companies who actually are doing having an observability strategy in place. I see teams who have different observability strategies, but very few companies that actually really think about where do we want to go with this, and not in, this is kind of what we see also, the problem with that created observability, or one of the problems with all these different silos of metrics, logs, and traces. For some teams, logs are more important. For other teams, metrics are more important. And you will see, there's a measurement of decentralization where DevOps teams get to choose what they do. You build it, you run it, you pick your own tooling. And then later on, some type of reunification process happens. And an observability strategy really needs to think about, what do I want to let go and want to decentralize, and what do I want to have centralized? And then these measurements of success are definitely at the top of the list. So just even starting there, I think, will be extremely useful. And I guess that one of the key challenges that I see also is that when you look at the vendor space, you have a lot of vendors who claim observability, but some are really good at logs, some are really good at metrics, some are really good at traces, and everybody wants to do everything. But then within modern enterprises, you still see that they have many different solutions. And so really, what's the strategy around that? And that's something that I think really needs to be key in solving some of the problems that are ahead also with observability.
And I'll jump in and say, I look at about at sort of 5 points, a bit of an alliteration, right? Objectives, right? So why are we implementing it? Sort of what is the breadth of implementing? What do we look to achieve at that level? But also objectives. Once the solution's implemented, what are some of the KPIs that we're globally measuring? Are we looking to improve SLA? Are we looking better to measure our performance against SLOs? Instrumentation, right? At the end of the day, kind of the richness and ability of observability solution to truly provide organizational impact is the ability to instrument across heterogeneous environments, but then to be able to do that continuously, right? As the technologies you're using are changing, your infrastructure is, as Lodewijk said earlier, it's very dynamic sort of environment on multiple dimensions. Then you need to look at infrastructure, right? We are talking again, as we mentioned earlier, this is kind of centralizing information around a very decentralized environment that will grow over time, but also will spike when it goes under load, is when the system's critical. So you need to give thought to infrastructure location, infrastructure scalability, adoption, right? And I think for an observability solution to provide value, Cyrille, as you said earlier, I won't go through them. There's steps to driving adoption that we follow in a DevOps transformation that are very important here. Awareness, so on and so forth. And then lastly, I'd say action. Great. We're getting all of this great data. We're even in a place where we can anticipate there's a change that may introduce risk. Are we enabled to quickly identify that and act on it? So objectives, instrumentation, infrastructure, adoption, and action would be what I say are key elements.
Yeah, I would add architecture to that list as well.
Yeah,
because you see that open telemetry, for example, is something that I think every observability strategy right now needs to mention in some form. I mean, we have to talk about what form, but making it so that all your modern applications are architected also with observability in mind really helps drive observability as a strategy forward and actually makes things possible. So yeah, I absolutely second all those points and add the architecture to
up the ante one.
There are two things on which I would like to contribute. One, Lodewijk said, so some teams are more logs oriented, some teams are more metrics on dashboards, some teams are more metrics. And I think it's very important to understand who you are, what is your culture. Not everybody is Google. That's a risk that we have seen in many things like DevOps transformation. You are not Google. Distributed traces, they are very useful, very interesting. Usually the culture is more dev people. Yeah. On some other peoples are more dashboard. They more look at the problem globally, holistically first, and then narrow down. And you have to understand who you are to choose the best practices that will matter to you. Be careful. If you are not familiar with traces, you may get lost looking at details on being inefficient. And so here, understanding who you are to understand what are the best practices that resonate with you is very important. Something else that resonated with me, Brian talked about service level objective, which is a kind of culture. It's a transformation to operate a system based on service level objectives. We also talked about SRE transformation. Something else that we have mentioned is the idea to shift left. So maybe to involve more the dev teams, as Lodewijk said, the DevOps teams, you build it, you run it. And you have to understand what you need to couple, which transformation do you need to couple with your observability journey. And the more you couple things together, the more difficult it will be to achieve any goal. I'm not sure we can completely decouple SLOs, for example, from observability, because SLOs is very helpful to achieve observability. But I am afraid if we couple too many things together, if I say 2022, I do simultaneously SRE transformation plus SLOs plus observability, embracing traces, it's way too much together. And that could be an important challenge.
Well, we have to jump into predictions. So it's predict 2022. And Lodewijk, just heads up, I'm going to come to you first. So as we think about this evolution of where we are and both the adoption and also the evolution of the technology, I mean, observability has come a long, long way. You talk about open telemetry and so many other aspects of this industry. What would you say are your predictions? What do we see for the future of 2022 and beyond for observability? So Lodewijk, if you would take a first crack at that.
Sure. So, I mean, I would make some generic predictions and then kind of work my way back from there. Because, one thing that you can see is the rise in dynamic applications. That's just going to rise more. Decentralization is just going to happen more. And observability really addresses the challenge there by actually centralizing the information. And by centralizing the information of these decentralized environments, we're now able to create some type of context, and context that before was very hard to get. And so the generic prediction is that we're going to see more context. Just going from a trace to a log to a metric, that's nice. But really what we want to be able to do is pull those service level objectives that Cyrille was talking about, and those business objectives, in and actually then contextualize those with the traces, logs, and metrics. So what I still see too much is dashboards full of gauges and interesting meters and stuff. But really what you want to be able to do is, hey, my service level objective is in danger. Really you would like to know before the problem happens, so it's in danger. And then you are given the right context to be able to troubleshoot that issue or to triage the problem. And so really it's about kind of turning the tables where before in monitoring and observability, really talking too much about all the technical components, but really what we want to be able to do is, observe our business and then look at what technically matters to it.
And if I may, I think a good segue for that I had in mind for predictions, Mitch, is that, we start to capture and measure more dimensions, including higher order dimensions, which is Lodewijk said is closer to the organizational objectives and SLOs. But I've also been really focused on kind of user experience, right? At the end of the day, we're humans developing systems for humans, right? And one of our measures of effectiveness are sort of behavioral attributes or how we can capture and quantify what the user experience is and start to begin more and more to sort of quantify that as a metric that we measure as we make changes, right? It can also give us some predictive view into degradation of a system, right? We're talking a lot about actually developer joy and developer delight. At the end of the day, we know, user delight, customer delight is going to be pretty key. So let's focus on that outcome. And I expect to see more of that in 2022. I also expect to see more awareness of observability solutions further left in the developer mindset. As Cyrille raised plenty of times, as we look to move faster, give developers more control to continuously deploy, there's a number of practices we're leveraging. What I expect to see this year, though, amongst those practices is tightening the feedback loop, right? Giving that continuous view that observability provides to developers in the context in which they are making changes. So, let's add more intelligence to this test and production concept.
It's a really interesting idea. Yeah. Go ahead, jump in, Cyrille.
So I will take another angle. We have heard questions about the future of logs, and logs is probably the main data source of observability today. And some people said logs are dead. I would challenge this. I think logs won't disappear. They will still be there and very important. However, traditional way of doing logs management is dead, as well as traditional dashboard, as Lodewijk said, because we are saturated with data, it's meaningless, it's impossible to use. And what will be successful in 2022 is a new generation of consumption of logs for observability that will leverage data science, machine learning, AI ops at large, to be able to extract information, relevant information from this stream of data that used to be very efficient as its own, but now is too big to be analyzed. So this is my first prediction is AI-enabled logs management will be very important because logs are still there and we will create a new value on them. Another thing is also on metrics, on traces. The volume of data we collect is huge. These are just big data, but not good data. And we need to provide insights on this data using statistics, AI ops at large as an umbrella to be able to assist users, operators to troubleshoot. And I will take something that Lodewijk said earlier, root cause analysis. I think AI ops, it's not about auto remediation. In 2022, and for some time, it will be about providing insights to operators, to our SREs, application support people to help find the root cause or the contributing factors. So this is one of my predictions, AI ops, first on logs, on globally to provide insights on the different signals and layers. Another thing for me is shift left, as Brian said, it's very important. It's very important to involve the dev team also, because if the dev team doesn't introduce in its code the right attributes to help understand the business logic that is executing inside traces, inside logs, then we don't achieve good observability. We need a meaningful message attribute in our traces. And so for this, we need to shift left. And typically, CI/CD observability is a way to shift left. Last but not least, I think observability will extend to security. We have seen with Log4j problem, we need to leverage the same observability techniques that we are building for maintaining system. We need to leverage them in the security landscape as well. So these are some of my predictions.
Well, thanks to all three of you. It's been a fantastic session. I guess I'll conclude with my first prediction is I think everyone participating, listening today, has their IQ on observability is probably raised about 10 points thanks to the three of you. So it really, truly has been a fantastic panel. And I really enjoyed your predictions as well as kind of setting the context for all of this. The one wrap-up thought I would add to it also is, we live in such an automated world that now is completely dynamic. You mentioned this, Lodewijk, where nothing is the way it was the moment it happened, right? Everything has changed anywhere in the stack across the entire, technology spectrum that we're using. It is in a constant state of flux, and you have to have new technologies and new approaches like observability. So thanks to the three of you and your respective companies for joining us on this panel. I appreciate your companies sponsoring and being part of this, StackState, and of course, Brian, Dawson and Elastic. Thank you to all of our audience members for joining us too. It's been our privilege to have this conversation with you. And good luck in 2022.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and see you later.